So, where to start when you talk about the life of the Buddha is a little bit hard. There's a famous collection of texts called the Jataka Tales, the Jataka Mala, they call it, and those are kind of the pre-beginning to the story. So, those are stories from the historical Buddha's previous births. Often they're about when he was an animal of some kind, a rabbit or an elephant or something like that. So there's a lot of these stories. There's like 547, I think, 540 something stories. And they're kind of very short little fables. Sometimes they're adapted from other collections of folk stories in India. So there's a collection called the Hitopadesha. And these are kind of short fables that have a kind of moral. So we have them in Western culture. We have Aesop's fables, and those are short little stories that tell a lesson. And they're frozen in some phrases. So if you say someone has sour grapes, right? Saying that someone has sour grapes, you say that when they don't get something they want and they decide that it's bad. That's from one of these fables, the Aesop's fables. That there's a fox who wants grapes and he tries to get it and he can't reach them, and then he says, well, they're probably sour, right? So these Jataka tales are tales about the Buddha before the lifetime in which he became the Buddha. So they often involve like really, really impressive sacrifices. So there's one where he's an elephant and he sees a bunch of travelers who are going to starve, and so he runs off a cliff so that he dies and they can eat his body, right? I'll put a link to a collection you can look online. You can sort of browse through them. But this is all to say that the story of the life of the Buddha doesn't have to start with that life, the final human life. It's part of a longer story. And we'll talk about the Jataka tales a little bit later. So in his final lifetime, he's born to a kind of king or a chief in a clan in a regional state in northern India, southern Nepal. This is the name of the clan is the Shakya clan. The Shakya clan later gets taken over by their neighbor, the Kosala. This happens while the Buddha is still living. It happens in the Buddha's lifetime. So this king, Shuddhodana, and Maya is the name of the Buddha's mother. They couldn't have children for a long time, and then Maya, the Buddha's mother, has a dream, and in this dream, she's carried away by a special being called a deva in the full moon to a sacred lake, and there's a white elephant carrying a lotus, and the elephant has 6 tusks, and it goes around her 3 times. So there's a way of venerating things throughout Asia is to walk a circle around it, usually clockwise, but not always. And the elephant enters her right side, and then she's pregnant, right? So all of this is highly symbolic. These are all symbols of enlightenment. They're symbols that something special is going to happen, and so then he's that's the kind of dream that she has, and then how she gets pregnant. So Maya sort of returns to her hometown so she can give birth. Her hometown is Lumbini, a place called Lumbini, which is now in Nepal. You can visit it. There's a bunch of temples and relics there. This all happens around 500 to 600 BCE. So 500 to 600 years BC. Sometimes you say BCE, before the current era. It's thought that she gives birth on the road. She doesn't make it to her hometown, and the Buddha is born through her right side. Now, the reason that is because there's a bunch of notions of purity going on. The left side in Indian culture is considered less clean, There's various explanations for this. One is that if you live in a place without toilet paper and you go to the bathroom and you have to wipe, you use your left hand, you wash it, you use your left hand, but so that's kind of seen to be unclean. And of course, like in a lot of places, the vagina is thought to be unclean, so of course Buddha is born through the side. The story goes, the Buddha stands up, faces north, takes 7 steps, and lotuses bloom at each step. And then he points up and declares that this will be his final birth. He's not gonna be born. He's not gonna take another lifetime. So the background here is that the people are stuck in a cycle of being born again and again and again, and to get enlightened is to get out of that cycle, to escape that cycle. It's not a specifically Buddhist idea. That's a pan-Indian idea. So his mother, Maya, dies during childbirth. 7 days later, he's raised by another wife of his father. There's a later episode that we'll sort of gloss over, but later he visits her in heaven and teaches to her. So he's born. His name is Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha is a name that means person who achieves their aims or achieves their goals. Gautama or Gotama is the lineage name. So sometimes he's referred to as Gautama Buddha. Sometimes he's referred to Shakyamuni Buddha. Those are 2 important names that you'll see referring to him. There, Shakyamuni refers to his clan, the Shakya clan. He's the sage of the Shakyas, the Muni of the Shakyas, Shakyamuni Buddha. So he spends his youth in relative privilege. His father brings in a priest to make a prediction, kind of holy person. And the prediction goes, he's either going to be a really important king or he's going to be a Buddha, someone who gets out of this cycle of birth and death. He's going to be a spiritual leader. His father, being the leader of a fairly weak state at the time, kingdom of the time, would prefer him to be a powerful king. So he sort of keeps him under wraps in the palace. He's educated as a prince. He's pretty smart. He's pretty skilled at doing different things. At 16, he's married through arrangement by his father to his cousin, and he spends 13 years as a prince. He has a child named Rahula. Then something important happens. So this is going to be the end of this first half of his life. A turning point happens, and this is called the 4 sights. He sees what's called the 4 sights. This happens when he's 29. He leaves the palace grounds for the first time. He's never been outside the palace. And what he sees is pretty shocking. He sees an old person, and he says, what's happened to that person? Why are they so decrepit? And then they say, well, that's an old person. People get old. He sees a sick person. This is the second sight, and he says, what's wrong with that person? And the person says, well, sometimes people get sick, And then he sees a corpse, and he says, what the heck is that? And he's told that people die. Eventually people die, and then that's what happens. And then the last thing he sees is a renunciate, someone who has renounced worldly life, a kind of spiritual practitioner. And that person looks to be at peace, even though all this awful stuff is going on. So you can kind of see the connection to the Four Noble Truths, right? He sees different kinds of dukkha, and then he sees that maybe it can be solved. There's a solution. So the renouncer that he sees is actually from a movement called the Shramana movement. So this was a kind of movement in India where people sort of gave up their lives, their jobs, their families, whatever, and they went to solve a kind of spiritual problem. They seek kind of religious goals. So that's what he sees. So this leads to what's called the Great Departure. the Buddha decides to leave his life and become one of these renunciants. So the night before, his wife gives birth to his son, and he takes this last dramatic look at his wife and son as he leaves in the night, and then he gets rid of his royal clothes, cuts his hair, and then goes on his way to try to solve the problem of dukkha.